Hey, what's up guys? It is Dan from FightWave, and today I'm bringing you guys an interview that I'm telling you guys right now, if you don't know the name Moses Deng right now, believe me, in about 2 or 3 years or maybe even less, he's going to become a household name across all of Australia and maybe across all of MMA. That's where this young man is headed. Today I'm speaking to one of the most highly accredited martial artists up and coming out of Australia. Only 22 years of age and turning the heads of fighters like Terrence McKinney and even Stylebender himself, Israel Adesanya. He's doing phenomenal things out of Western Australia, out of Wolves Den, Perth. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to the Killmonger myself, Moses Deng. How are we doing today, brother?
Amazing, man. Appreciate you giving me this platform today.
Absolutely, man. The pleasure is all mine. And, you know, we spoke off air. Anytime I see a young person getting after it, somebody who's in a similar age bracket as mine, I always draw inspiration from what they've been able to accomplish. I wanted to ask you how everything's been and just, you know, how's training been and how's everything been in the life of Moses Deng?
Training's been pretty good. Everything's been going well. I fought 4 times this year, won all 4 fights across 2 weight classes. So it's been a very active year, a very successful year, you know. I'm also a uni student. I'm studying architecture at university, so it gets a little tricky to balance that every now and then, but everything's been pretty good this year. It's been a really nice and active year. It's very successful as well.
Absolutely, and I love to hear that. Obviously, on top of getting 4 fights in this year, which is crazy in and of itself, as an amateur in Australia, I know the amateur scene in Australia is booming. They love to stay active. On top of getting 4 fights, 4 camps this year, and also getting after it academically, that's always something I love to see. How's that been to balance, obviously, the academics as an architecture major, which is a great major, I might add, and also, you know, be able to go and fight 4 times this year and not get a mixed bag of results, but just a wealth of experience in the process?
Yeah, it just depends on your situation. Because for me, originally I was doing full-time study and also training, which it definitely starts to take a toll on you mentally because you go from uni mentally already exhausted from classes, and then you go to training, you know. And so I made the decision to go part-time early this year, and felt like it's really helped because now I have more time to train as well as not being mentally exhausted or burnt out from uni as well, you know. But you just got to find that kind of like Goldilocks zone of balance between study life and MMA training for everything to just flow really well, you know what I mean?
No, yeah, absolutely. I agree myself right now, going to school on top of running the brand. It definitely takes a certain level of balance in and of itself to really be able to do both things in an optimal, you know, sense or fashion. But I feel like we really get to see that balance very harmoniously in your fighting style because you look at the gym that you come from and obviously the people you train with. It's hard not to think about MMA on top of going to school when you got such great fighters surrounding you at Wolves Den, Perth, and more importantly, just the bodies and, you know, so much inspiration to be drawn from. I mean, your teammate Frank Jankowski fighting for eternal flyweight gold in just a couple weeks time, I should add. Talk to me just about training at Wolves Den on top of just having such a star-studded group of fighters to work with and earn knowledge off of.
It's really good because like we don't necessarily have a big team. We have a very small team, and I feel like it's better because the quality of fighters is really high, and the more doesn't mean the merrier, you know what I mean? And so at our gym, we've got guys with the likes of Alden Bates, who's 8-3, he's a pro. We've got Frank Jankowski. We've got Kevin Cophamel, who's also an undefeated pro. And then you got myself coming up and a couple other young guys. So I feel like our small team has a really high quality of fighters, and that's what's producing so much success from our gym, you know? And then also, like, I draw inspiration from my teammates as well. Like Frank, 3-0 as a pro, about to fight for the Australian flyweight title on Eternal. And that's a title I want to get one day. So watching my boy get that, it motivates me to work towards that goal as well, you know? And then also my boy, his twin, Ryan Jankowski, who's fighting for the title on, 5 days notice now? He's fighting this weekend coming. And so seeing all that stuff happen around me is inspirational, and I feel like seeing them succeed in life makes me more motivated and like more driven to have that same type of success as well, you know?
No, yeah, definitely. Obviously, the Jankowski twins getting after it, having them around you. Alden Bates also as a great training partner. You know, right now, Western Australia is going through a renaissance of sorts and finally getting the love I think it deserves. You look at just the quality of talent, and in my opinion, the region and state in Australia that's really been the leader in 2023. 284 really kickstarted a phenomenal year for the Aussies. You look at Steve Erceg, went in on short notice, great performance. Jack Della Maddalena doing a great job himself. And then on top of that, Cody Haddon fighting for Hex Gold, with Sean Gauchi November 18th. Quillen Salkill fighting on the same card as Frank, defending his lightweight title. And then Frank obviously fighting for flyweight gold then as well. It's been a busy year for Western Australia. What does it mean for you to see somebody from a similar state, a state that prior, it was a little difficult to get fights in? You're looking at them, they're fighting in rings as opposed to cage. Cage combat only got legalized recently. Talk to me about that inspiration, seeing somebody from the same state as you and so many people getting after it, and how does that motivate you?
It's really good to see because Perth, when people think about Australia, it's always the eastern states and like the eastern cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and all that. Perth is always kind of like forgotten. We're always just like in the corner alone, And so now that we're getting the recognition we deserve, and we're getting guys up in the highest level of MMA, and it's just very inspirational. It's very nice to see because like for a hot minute, but say before around 2020, what guys were in Perth that were in the UFC or making big moves, So it's only recently Perth really started popping off and like Western Australia really started making a name for itself. So I feel like it's long overdue, but it's well deserved.
Absolutely, and I agree in the sense that it's been a long time coming. It's been culminating over years of amateur fighters and fighters on the regional scene really pushing and making, Perth fighters kind of be heard and recognized. Because like you mentioned, oftentimes people always think of, Sydney or they think of like the Gold Coast or Brisbane as premier cities, but Perth often kind of gets left on the back burner alongside, maybe, Adelaide as a state, and Western Australia as a greater whole. You see that the more western side of Australia doesn't get recognition, but I feel like Perth have been just leading by example this year. It's been remarkable to see, and it shows the depth of talent in the Australian regional scene. I mean, talk to me just about, even now, starting, your young career thus far, the opportunity of just having the ability to cross-train at so many great gyms. You got Wolves Den Perth, Scrappy MMA and Fitness, Louis Stroh Combat Academy. There's so many good gyms across Australia as a whole, and Western Australia. So how's that opportunity to cross-train been?
It's been amazing. Like the likes of Steve Erceg, I've had the pleasure of training with him. Yeah, he whooped my ass, bro. I won't even lie, man. Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot, and having so many good people in one area, I feel like we all help each other grow. Like I haven't had the pleasure of training with the likes of Cody Haddon or Quillen yet, and it's something I look forward to. But I've been able to go to other gyms, train with like I'm not sure if you know Abdullah as well, Abdullah Biata. Yeah. So I've had the pleasure of cross training with him as well, and so I feel like having such a small city, but with a lot of gyms with elite fighters, feels like it helps other fighters from opposing gyms also grow as well. And once we have that community of like letting other fighters from other gyms come in and train with us, I feel like it helps everybody else in the city trying to make a name for themselves, And so, yeah, I've been able to go to Kick-Ass MMA where Abdullah trains. I've been able to go to Wilkie's Martial Arts where Steve Erceg trains. And it's just been a pleasure. I feel like I've learned a lot, made a lot of good connections through them as well. So I feel like it's definitely beneficial for everybody because I see some gyms that are really stingy. They're like, nah, you stay over there because you're from that gym. And I feel like they just limits the opportunity and like doors that can be possibly opened through the connections that can be made through that little bit of training, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's been really good. It's been very, very beneficial for me.
No, yeah, absolutely. And obviously you mentioned a name that I was going to bring up as well, Abdullah Biata. What he's done as the Hex champion in the featherweight division, it's been phenomenal. And if I recall, both of you guys are obviously of Sudanese, roots, right? Talk to me about how that experience has been. Obviously, similar background growing up. And then you mentioned on another podcast, and this was something I love to hear because it just shows the age and like growing up, because I had a similar experience with this movie too. You mentioned the inspiration drawn from the Karate Kid movie with Jaden Smith. Classic movie, man. I can't even hate on it. It's just a great movie, feel good, with Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith getting after it. The inspiration drawn from that to actually lead you to pursue a path of martial arts, and it has such a, I hate to say Gen Z because it's like corny, but it has such a Gen Z twist to it, but it's so like wholesome and fulfilling to hear. And then also, obviously you look at what Abdullah has done as a Sudanese fighter and also an Australian fighter. Talk to me about how that conversation may have gone, just you guys interacting, and obviously just the motivation that you get from someone like him, what he's done, assuming, featherweight gold in the regional scene in Australia as a guy of a similar background as yourself.
Yeah. It's been really cool to watch Abdullah grow and develop as a fighter, especially coming from a Sudanese background. Because in MMA, there's like almost no Sudanese in this game, Like in the big leagues, there's like absolutely no Sudanese. There's no Sudanese in the UFC right now. And so what I'm hoping to happen is Abdullah be the first UFC Sudanese fighter. And then hopefully I'm just right behind him. I become the second. But yeah, I feel like in the last maybe 2 years, I've seen like a rise in Sudanese people jumping into MMA as well, seeing what Abdullah has done. And then also like people have seen what I've been doing on the MMA scene and messaging me saying what my work is, this and this, and like how I've inspired them to also start training as well. And so it's very surreal to hear that kind of stuff because I'm just an amateur, bro. I haven't even made a name for myself. And that I'm having that type of impact on other people, it's like, I don't know, it's very humbling. And so it's gonna be a pleasure being a Sudanese person representing my country in the UFC when I eventually get there, as well as watching Abdullah pretty much pave the way. So once he gets there, I'll know what to do and what not to do because he would have already experienced all that, you know what I mean? And then with the MMA thing, like that Karate Kid movie is what set everything off, bro. Like, I remember watching it and I really wanted to get into karate, but my parents never let me because I was too skinny. I was gonna get hurt and all this. But I made like a little mental note. I was like, when I'm old enough and I have the ability to start training, I'm gonna start training because this is for me. MMA is for me, And then fast forward like 10 years, I start training and I'm training with Abdullah. And so I trained with Abdullah's gym for about 2 years, which is called Kick-Ass MMA, before I moved to Wolves Den. But yeah, it's just been an amazing road to where I'm at now, watching Abdullah grow, watching him being like pretty much the poster boy for Sudanese boys in the MMA scene, and then also just making my own path and also pretty much living up to the dreams and expectations of what a younger version of me wants to live up to, So it's been pretty cool.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned a little bit earlier. And I kind of wanted to take a step back and peel the layers and give yourself some credit because you mentioned people reaching out to you and saying that you've inspired them and you kind of being amazed or shocked that people will look up to you. But what you've done as a young fighter in the space, not many young fighters are able to generate the amount of hype in the amateur circuit, let alone in MMA, that you've been able to, kind of generate for yourself. And it comes down to the way that you carry yourself. Obviously, you understand, I think there's a certain level of credit that needs to be given to the showmanship side of MMA, but also when showmanship meets skill, well, you get a very special athlete and a very special case indeed. So much so that you've obviously attracted the eyes and attention of fighters like Israel Adesanya, Terrence McKinney, and even you mentioned off air the management of Israel Adesanya or like part manager, Ash James. Just looking at the highest of the high, cream of the crop fighters and MMA personnel that you've kind of attracted with your likeness, it speaks to a very special understanding that you have for the game and just the understanding of what it takes to really have that it factor. So in terms of attracting that attention from a lot of the big names in MMA, what's that been like for you and just having them reach out and recognizing that you've got something special in the way that you go about this sport?
With the whole marketing thing, I feel like I've also mentioned this on another podcast before, but I feel like a lot of MMA fighters neglect that side of the sport. So like I've spoken about this topic so many times with other fighters, but I tell them to like try to make their personality a little bit more marketable after like a fight and they're having a post-fight interview or even the way they carry themselves on social media, because you don't have the full potential of your career unlocked if you don't know how to market yourself, because I know it's a bad example, but like even in the UFC, you get guys who don't seem like they're deserving of certain opportunities, but they know how to market themselves. They bring in eyes to the sport, and so they get Dana White privilege. You know what I mean? And so I've been able to like study people like Sean O'Malley. He does it really well. He was unranked and he already made what, like over $1 million, and that's just because he marketed himself really well. And he was fighting. He was fighting. People will hate, but like he was fighting cams and all that. But how many fighters who are ranked and still struggling financially? Like Pantoja was still doing Uber Eats while he was like a top ranked flyweight. And so for me, I don't want to be in this game for too long. I want to retire at like 33 years old. And so I want to unlock the full potential of the sport, whether it's like business opportunities, this and that. And so for me, I understand I have to put on entertaining fights. I have to have an entertaining fighting style. I have to win fights against tough guys. And then and outside of fighting, I know how to market myself, and I need to market myself to have all those doors open for me. And so, like, I've talked to some guys close to me, and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna let my fighting do the talking, this and this." But I'm just an amateur. I've turned this many heads. I've made this much noise, all because I have entertaining fights, and I know how to market myself. There's guys who are pros, undefeated, and they're less known than me because they neglect the marketing side of the sport. It's such a crucial and important part, and people just like they limit the understanding of it. And so they see what I'm doing, and I've heard comments here and there like, Moses thinks he's all this, Moses thinks he's all that. No, I'm only getting all this stuff because I like myself. You're getting jealous that you're not getting the same opportunities as me, because why? My fighting is gonna do the talking. That's why. If you want to have the same opportunities as me, you're gonna have to start learning how to market yourself, and it's such an important thing that people neglect a lot. So it's sad to see, but I'm happy I recognized it a lot earlier on. So it's a good thing to know and a good thing to use.
No, yeah, absolutely. And for me, when you mention obviously the marketing side of it, it's really important to
Mm,
experiment in the amateur scene because that's the record that, doesn't translate to the pros, obviously. It's where you're supposed to
mm,
build a name for yourself. You're supposed to turn heads. You're supposed to, at least get some sort of looks because if you're not getting looks in the amateur scene, chances are you're not going to get looks in the professional circuit as well. So it's really important to
mm,
to just understand that side of it and also just build a level of credibility for yourself. Obviously, you want to let your fights do the talk. You want to have a skill that reflects the talking, but you also don't want to be, like you mentioned, maximizing the full potential of this sport in every scope. It can't be done without being a talker. It is called prize fighting for a reason.
exactly.
It
Yeah,
is just called like entertainment to some degree for a reason because not only do you gotta build up the fights and fight good, of course, but you've also got to be able to sell pay-per-views. You've got to be able to sell yourself as a product. You are the product at the end of the day as a fighter, and if you're not able to sell
mm,
yourself as a fighter or as a talent, how do you expect other people to buy into that if it's just off raw skill? MMA has only been a growing sport, a sport that's being internationally recognized as time goes on. Without that massive audience and that idea of who's the best fighter, you know, what else are you gonna use to sell yourself as a talent? And in doing so,
exactly.
you've done such a great job in that regard because you've caught the attention of and you've even been recognized. And I know when Adesanya came out to Perth for 284 to support Volkanovski,
Yeah,
you met with him and he recognized you there firsthand. He's like, and he even messaged
yeah,
you on
surreal.
Instagram, which is an out of body experience when you get recognized by someone
Mm,
like Israel Adesanya. Talk to me
yeah,
about that experience and also just him maybe dropping the wisdom on you and seeing something in you because it's not every day you have someone like the style bender reaching out to a young amateur fighter coming up trying to get his own and getting that kind of love. So talk to me about that experience.
yeah. That whole door opened for me September 18, 2021. It was after I got my second fight. I knocked the dude out. And then that fight that got a lot of attention somehow. I think it's because of the way I knocked the dude out. Because I think I hit him really hard. Yeah, so I hit him really hard, and then I put my hands behind my back, and that obviously got on his nerves. So then I saw that. I recognized he was getting emotional, so I did a bit of an Ali shuffle. I was like, let me rope him in a little bit more. and then I hit him with 1-2, which dropped him, and then I finished him off on the ground. And so I feel like that finish is what really got the fight booming. And then literally the next day, Adesanya's sister reacts to my story, and I was like, yeah, it's got to be a fake account or something, you know? And then turns out it was real. And then literally the same day, a couple hours later, Israel messages me, you know? And so that interaction I had with Israel really put me on the map because people started recognizing me. Because if Israel recognizes my talent, then everyone was like, "Yo, why is he looking at this kid Moses? You know, what's he got to do with anything?" And so they started looking into me, and then everything just really started popping off. And then, like you mentioned, the UFC that came in February. I went to the meet and greet. He recognized me, and then we talked for a little bit. And then I got a little interview done, and he put it on his YouTube video, and I feel like that really boosted my stock as well. And so ever since then, everything's just been going up, and I feel like I got to give credit to him for pretty much giving me a really needed boost in my career because that's put me in the position I am now. I'm in it now, you know. And then also with guys like James McKinney recognizing my talent, I feel like that's also boosted my stock as well. And so it's just been such a surreal experience because before all that happened, Israel was my favorite fighter, you know, and he still is my favorite fighter. And so it's kind of like the equivalent of someone, say, a kid who plays soccer and Ronaldo messages him, you know, that'd feel like crazy. And so that's what it felt like for me. And then, yeah, it's just been going up ever since. And then I've had younger guys message me like, yo, when I get to the UFC and they ask me who inspired me to get to the UFC, and they're like, it'll be Moses Deng. And I'm like, bro, it means a lot, you know? So it's a cool thing to experience. And that all just started because of that one knockout and then that one interaction with Israel. And so it's opened up a world of opportunities for me and given me a platform to inspire the next generation, just like guys like Israel have been inspiring me, you know? So it's a weird feeling, but it almost feels too good to be true. It feels like I'm in a story mode, you know, like on 2K and all that. So it's pretty cool.
No, yeah, I love that answer for so many reasons because it just speaks to how inspiration is drawn. Because oftentimes, you know, you look at MMA and a lot of people don't really showcase or broadcast their inspirations behind the sport. They just kind of have these ulterior motives. But I feel like when you have fighters with an open-ended source of inspiration, like you mentioned, Adesanya being a lot of people's favorite fighters, like yourself, and him reaching out and seeing something in you, it gives you a boost of confidence even in your fighting. It improves you as a fighter because if you're being recognized for, you know, your skill early on by one of the best to ever do it, what does that say about your skill maybe 4 or 5 years from now if you keep pushing it the same mindset or same way and it continuing to improve? And also being a leader for like that next generation, it's a very fulfilling process. And I think we see that even right now, not shying away from, you know, the recipe or the formula that's gotten to where you to where you are right now, doing it at your own pace, doing it the way that you found works for you. I feel like a lot of fighters struggle to find that sense of comfort in terms of the right balance of trash talk and like selling the fight and that right balance of where skill meets preparation, where the skill backs up the trash talk. But I feel like you've done that kind of effortlessly throughout your career right now.
Yeah.
And so much so that obviously after Eternal 78, you know, even not even shying away from pulling your punches there and calling out another great guy who was just coming off his pro debut, Joe Larchinesi. I wanted to ask you about that interaction real quick, just the backstory behind it, and if that's a fight that maybe intrigues you moving forward.
Yeah, I wanted to fight Joe back in June because I also competed in the Gamma Oceania Championships. So I was representing Team Australia. And I remember they had released the roster of fighters from each country, and I saw Joe's name on there. And so I got interested from that point on. And so I was looking forward to competing against him in New Zealand. But then when we got there, he didn't come, you know, he didn't come compete. So I was a little bummed out because I was really looking forward to that matchup. And the only reason I was interested in fighting him is because he had a pretty good record. You know, he was one of the top fighters. I think at the time he was ranked number 3 on Tapology in all of Australia. And so that intrigued me even more. And his record was like, what, 4-0 or 4-1. And so I knew he was a game opponent, so I wanted to fight him back then. Obviously, that didn't come into fruition. And then I was hoping to fight him in October because I had seen he was going to be fighting sometime in September over East. And so I had looked at the calendar, and that the October card that's coming now would have been 7 weeks after that event. And so I was hoping and praying that he took no damage in that fight so we can fight this month. Because I planned originally to have one pro fight this year, 4 or 5 pro fight next year, and hopefully 2025 early on get a call up to the contender series. But obviously that also hasn't come into fruition yet. But yeah, so then he has the fight. He wins in the first round by submission. I thought we were gonna go ahead with the plan and fight him in October, but then he said that he's injured and he wants to heal or something like that, which is I still don't understand that because he says he wants to heal up, but he got 7 weeks to heal, and you took absolutely no damage in that fight. You fought a grappler who you submitted. You know, what kind of damage are you going to take from a grappler in one round? So I understand if he doesn't want to fight me, you know. I wouldn't want to fight me either, but eventually it's going to happen. And so I'm looking forward to beating Joe. He's a good name. I feel like he'll add to my resume. And so starting off my pro career against a guy who's 1-0, has an undefeated record, and giving him his first defeat as a pro, which will stick his whole career, something I look forward to doing.
No, yeah, absolutely. That's a fight I really want to see on the regional scene. Just, I feel like if that's a fight to make for a pro debut, it's a hell of a debut. I love Joe. He's a great buddy of mine, and just somebody obviously
Yeah,
who he's a great guy, great fighter, and that's a fight I would want to see coming up. But just in terms of like ambitions, you mentioned obviously that pro debut hope of this year falling out. Is that still something you want to do this year? Obviously making that pro debut maybe in a November card or December card just to close the year out strong and get some momentum on that pro record.
yeah. With that, originally, this was actually 2 days ago. I got offered to fight for the vacant Party Hex title over in Melbourne on 5 days' notice. But unfortunately, I was out and I wasn't able to reply in time. And since it was an urgent matter, they gave it to my teammate Ryan, which I'm completely happy for because like he hasn't had a good fight all year, and so I feel like he's very deserving of it. And so it wasn't meant to be. And but if I had been home and like seen the message, I definitely would be fighting this coming weekend for the Path title. It is an amateur title, but it's because I'm not sure if I'll get a pro fight this year, so I'll take whatever I want, you know? I'll take whatever I can get. Because originally, at the start of the year, I'd planned to do 5 fights and go 5 wins as well. So that's something I still want to do, but if it doesn't come into fruition, then it doesn't. But my name's been put down for November, I think November 20th or November 25th for the domination card, and so we're looking to find another pro flyweight. And so if that comes into fruition, then that'll be perfect because I can finish off the year off strong, 5 fights, 5 wins, an undefeated pro record, and then have my 4 fights next year, hopefully get to 5-0. And then hopefully that's enough to get a call up to the contender series. If not, then I'll probably do like 1 or 2 more early 2025, and then hopefully that'll be enough to get the call up.
Absolutely. So, like, in terms of just mapping it out, consistency is definitely something you want. Staying active as a pro, not something to shy away from. Just accepting any fights that come your way, and definitely looking to not fast track the run to the UFC or a major promotion, but definitely looking to get in there early, young, and experience
Yeah,
all the ups and all the downs at the highest level, not necessarily stuck on a regional circuit and just capitalizing on it.
yeah, because I've spoken to that. I've spoken to people about that because like some people may see it as me trying to like rush it to the big leagues, but my philosophy on that is that I want to get to the UFC or like the big leagues early on while I'm still young. So I learn the necessary lessons or take the necessary losses so I can become the best mixed martial artist I can be early on. Because before I hit my prime, I want to have learned all those experiences and grown as a fighter. So then when I do get to my prime, I'm not fumbling steps. I'm not like taking missteps or like having to go back to square one to learn a lesson I should have learned earlier on, you know? I don't want to waste my prime losing. I don't want to waste my prime learning lessons. I want to use my prime just having success. Well, I know it's not necessarily 100% realistic, but I want most of my prime to consist of winning and not learning, you know? Because like a guy for a good example would be like Oliveira, you know? He took a bunch of losses early on in his career, and they shaped him into the fighter he is now. So imagine if he had done that earlier on when he was a lot younger. His whole successful run would have been a lot longer if he had learned those lessons a lot earlier, you know? And so I want to be in the UFC around first half of 2025. I'll be 23, turning 24. And so I want to use those early few years, maybe 2 or 3 years, just learning all the lessons that I need to learn, growing as a fighter. And then when I hit like 27 is when I start like getting up there, you know, and I won't have to like worry about something in regards to like experience or how to fight a jits guy because I would have learned it early on, you know. So my prime could be prolonged just having success. So I want to have all those experiences now, if that
Absolutely.
makes sense.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like this idea of optimizing. You don't wanna go into the UFC, continue to learn lessons, and then like possibly get cut or never be able to
Yeah.
showcase the full extent of your skill set. But you want to be able to learn those lessons early on in your career so that it becomes a capping stone or a catalyst to improve later on in your career. Because like you mentioned, I think earlier in the podcast you mentioned obviously 33, 34 being a window that you want to be out of this sport by. You got to be able to capitalize and optimize on the window and not
Mm,
necessarily like obviously a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, oh, who's this guy, like why is he saying all this stuff, like he's got this over ambitious timeline. But it's about kind of not necessarily willing it into existence and speaking it into existence, but understanding the sport long term, having like a 10-year plan. And so like
mm,
even if you deviate off that course, you still have an understanding of where you need to be or where you could get to based on the path that
mm,
you've taken. So it's not necessarily like, oh, Moses is being too ambitious, he's in over his head or something like that. But it's like, okay, Moses understands that this is a possibility. He's going about it
mm,
this way so that if it doesn't go this way, he can go this way. And just understanding that pathway to really get to that next level. So, I mean, that's a great idea, in my opinion. And it's one that I look forward to watching. And obviously, Moses, thank you so much for your time, just for the opportunity to speak here and pick your brain. You know, we mentioned off air just that idea of seeing someone in a similar age bracket, getting after it, doing it in a similar fashion, in a different perspective, you know, obviously me covering the sport and going to school, and you obviously going to school and training the disciplines and fighting in the sport, always some sort of inspiration to be drawn. And anyone that kind of puts on for the younger generation, it's like you got to get behind them when they come up. So I wanted to thank you so much for your
mm.
time, for obviously your
Yeah.
perspective, and just seeing what you continue to do as a young fighter. It's going to be really interesting and amazing to see the evolution and growth of Moses Deng, the Killmonger in this sport. I wanted to ask you, just on a final note, any message for the fans at home and supporters, like you mentioned, people reaching out to you and saying, you know, how much you've inspired them, and just any message for anyone who wants to maybe go all in on the sport but isn't able to do so.
Um, I'll start off with everyone that's like supported me up until this point, you know, like I appreciate everybody that's giving me the overwhelming support and just like pushing me to become a better fighter every day, you know, my teammates, my coach Steve Walton, and then also like all the kids, all the younger people that say I inspired them, you know, it's a very humbling experience in of itself, you know. And so yeah, it's a really nice feeling to have. What can you guys expect from me in the next 2 years? Just expect greatness, you know. 2025, I'll be in the UFC for sure. And so just expect a movie for the next 2 years, you know. It's a Killmonger there's a Killmonger era for a reason. And so y'all just get to witness my chronicles unfold.
Absolutely. And to the fans at home watching and to the FightWave supporters at home watching and listening, you guys heard it here first. 2025, the world is going to know Moses Dang's name. The Killmonger is coming for the major promotions. And to the flyweights in the Australian regional circuit, definitely getting put on notice. Joe, if you're watching this, this might be a fight to make. Moses Dang versus Joe Larchinesi. I can't say anything because I love both of you guys. Like, dude, like I love both of you guys, so I gotta stay neutral here. But that's a fight I would love to see. And to the fans at home watching, do be sure to check out Moses Dang on social media. Already attracting the eyes of the biggest names in the sport, like Israel Adesanya and Terrence McKinney. You don't get those guys' attentions unless you're something special and you've got that it factor. And Moses Dang has definitely got that it factor. Do be sure to check him out on social media. It's been me, Dan from FightWave, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this interview. Do be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And have a great day, guys.